The fluorescent lights above my hospital bed buzzed with that familiar electrical hum, casting everything in a cold, sterile glow. My sister Vanessa stood at the foot of my bed, her designer heels clicking impatiently against the linoleum floor as she checked her watch for the third time in 2 minutes. Her perfectly manicured fingers drummed against her purse, and I could practically feel the waves of annoyance radiating from her. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I really can't stay much longer, Maya, she said, not even bothering to meet my eyes. The charity gala is tonight, and I'm being honored for my fundraising work. You know how important these events are for my reputation. She paused, glancing at the IV drip connected to my arm with visible discomfort. Besides, it's not like you're dying or anything. The doctor said it's just exhaustion and dehydration. I wanted to tell her that collapsing in the middle of a grocery store parking lot after working 18-hour days for 3 weeks straight was more than just simple exhaustion. I wanted to explain that the dark circles under my eyes weren't from staying up late binge-watching Netflix, but from something she could never understand. Instead, I just nodded weakly and said, "Of course, Van. Go ahead. Your event is more important." She leaned down and gave me the briefest peck on the cheek, careful not to smudge her lipstick. "I'll call you tomorrow," she promised, though we both knew she wouldn't. As her heels clicked away down the hospital corridor, growing fainter with each step, I closed my eyes and tried to ignore the familiar sting of being dismissed yet again. That's when I heard the commotion outside my room. Raised voices, rapid footsteps, and what sounded like someone speaking in a language I couldn't quite place. A moment later, my door burst open, and a nurse I'd never seen before rushed in. She was a small woman, maybe in her 50s, with kind eyes and graying hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. But what struck me most was the way she looked at me, not with the polite professional distance I'd grown accustomed to from the medical staff, but with something that looked almost like recognition. "Excuse me," she said, her accent thick and musical, "but are you Maya Chen? Maya Chen who works for the Water Foundation?" Her voice trembled slightly as she spoke, and I noticed her hands were shaking. The question hung in the air like a challenge I wasn't prepared for. How could this nurse possibly know about my work? I'd gone to great lengths to keep that part of my life separate from everything else, especially from my family. But something in her eyes, a mixture of hope and desperation, made me nod slowly. "Yes," I whispered, my throat still raw from dehydration. "I'm Maya Chen." The nurse's face crumpled, and she pressed her hands to her mouth as tears began streaming down her cheeks. "Oh, blessed saints," she whispered, in what I now recognized as a Filipino accent. "It's really you. You saved us. You saved my entire village." I stared at her in confusion, trying to process what she was saying. "I'm sorry, I think there might be some mistake." "No mistake," she said firmly, wiping her tears with the back of her hand. "My name is Rosa Delgado. I'm from Barangay San Miguel in Mindanao. 3 years ago, our village was dying. Our children were sick, our crops were failing, and we had no clean water. Then you came." The memory hit me like a physical blow. Barangay San Miguel, of course. It had been one of my first major solo projects after joining the International Clean Water Initiative. The village had been in crisis, with contaminated groundwater and a broken infrastructure system that had left nearly 2,000 people without access to safe drinking water. I'd spent 4 months there, living in a small hut, working alongside local engineers to design and implement a sustainable water purification system. "But how did you know I was here?" I asked, still struggling to understand how this connection had been made. Rosa smiled through her tears. "My nephew works in the hospital administration. When he saw your name on the patient registry, he told me immediately. You see, everyone in our village knows the name Maya Chen. We pray for you every Sunday at Mass. There's a plaque with your name on our community well." I felt a warmth spreading through my chest that had nothing to do with the fever I'd been running. For 3 years, I'd wondered what had happened to the people of Barangay San Miguel after I left. The foundation moved me to new projects so quickly that I rarely got follow-up reports on previous work. Hearing that the system had not only worked, but had transformed their lives filled me with a profound sense of purpose I'd forgotten I was capable of feeling. But I have to ask, Rosa continued, her voice growing more urgent, why are you here alone? Where is your family? When I heard Maya Chen was in the hospital, I expected to see people lined up down the hallway, wanting to pay their respects to the woman who saved so many lives. The question was innocent enough, but it cut deeper than any scalpel. How could I explain that my family saw my work as nothing more than an expensive hobby? That my sister Vanessa regularly introduced me at parties as Maya, who plays in the dirt with poor people overseas? That my parents, both successful lawyers in their own right, had spent years trying to convince me to give up my phase and join their firm? They're busy, I said lamely, which was technically true. They were always busy with things they deemed more important than anything happening in my life. Rosa's expression shifted, and I could see her trying to reconcile the disconnect between the woman she'd built up in her mind and the reality of someone lying alone in a hospital bed. In her village, I was a hero, a savior, someone whose very name was spoken with reverence. Here, I was just Maya, the disappointing daughter who'd chosen to waste her engineering degree on charity work instead of making real money. The divide between these two versions of myself had been growing wider for years, and I'd become an expert at compartmentalizing. When I was overseas, working on water systems in remote villages or training local technicians on maintenance procedures, I felt alive in a way that nothing else could match. But the moment I came home, I transformed back into the family disappointment, the one who couldn't seem to get her life together according to their standards. My parents, Margaret and David Chen, had built their law firm from nothing, working 18-hour days and sacrificing everything for success. They'd achieved the American dream and couldn't understand why their daughter wanted to give up financial security to help people they'd never meet in countries they'd never visit. To them, success was measured in billable hours, luxury cars, and prestigious addresses. My work, no matter how meaningful, didn't fit into those categories. Vanessa had followed perfectly in their footsteps. She was a partner at one of the city's most exclusive law firms, married to another successful attorney, living in a penthouse downtown, and attending charity galas where wealthy people wrote checks to feel good about themselves without ever getting their hands dirty. She was everything our parents wanted in a daughter, and I was everything they couldn't quite understand how to fix. I need to call my village, Rosa said, suddenly, pulling out her phone. They won't believe this. Maya Chen is here, in our city, and she needs our help. Oh no, I said quickly. That's really not necessary. I'm fine, honestly. I'll be discharged tomorrow. But Rosa was already dialing, speaking rapidly in Tagalog. I caught a few words I remembered from my time in the Philippines, but her excitement made her speech too fast for me to follow. Within minutes, she was showing me her phone screen, which displayed a video call with what appeared to be half the village crowded around a single device. Look, Rosa exclaimed, pointing the camera at me. It's her! It's Maya Chen! The reaction was immediate and overwhelming. Faces pressed closer to the screen, voices calling out my name, hands waving enthusiastically. I saw familiar faces mixed with new ones, children who would have been toddlers when I was there, now old enough to understand who I was and what I'd done for their community. Miss Maya, called out a voice I recognized as belonging to Engineer Santos, the local technician I'd worked most closely with. You look tired.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
Are you sick? What can we do? The genuine concern in their voices was almost too much to bear. These people, who had so little in terms of material wealth, were ready to help me however they could. Meanwhile, my own sister couldn't spare more than 20 minutes because she had a party to attend. Tell them I'm okay, I said to Rosa, my voice thick with emotion. Tell them their prayers mean everything to me. As Rosa translated, I watched the faces on the screen light up with relief and joy. Someone started singing what I remembered as a traditional blessing song, and soon the entire crowd had joined in. The melody was beautiful and haunting, carrying across the ocean through fiber optic cables to reach me in this sterile hospital room. When the call ended, Rosa sat down in the chair Vanessa had vacated. You know, she said thoughtfully, in our culture, when someone saved lives the way you did, they become family, not just to one person, but to the entire community. You are our daughter, our sister, our hero. We would never let you face anything alone. Her words hit me harder than I expected. Family. It was such a simple concept, but one I'd struggled with my entire life. I'd been born into a family that loved me in their own way, but had never really understood me. And now, thousands of miles away, I had another family, one that had claimed me based not on blood, but on actions. They saw my worth not in terms of salary or social status, but in terms of lives saved and communities transformed. Rosa, I said carefully, can I ask you something? How is the village doing now? The water system, the infrastructure we built, is it still working? Her face lit up with pride. Oh, Miss Maya, you should see it now. Not only is it working, but Engineer Santos trained other villages how to build similar systems. Your design has been replicated in 7 other communities. Thousands of people now have clean water because of what you started in our little village. I felt tears welling up in my eyes. This was the first time I'd heard concrete follow-up on any of my projects. The Clean Water Initiative was always moving us to new crises, new emergencies that needed immediate attention. We were like a medical trauma unit, stabilizing patients and moving on without ever seeing the long-term recovery. To hear that my work had not only lasted but had grown and spread to help even more people was better than any medicine the hospital could give me. There's something else, Rosa continued, reaching into her purse. When my nephew told me you were here, I went home and got this. She pulled out a small, worn photograph and handed it to me. It was a picture of the village's main square during the dedication ceremony for the water system. I was standing next to the new well, surrounded by smiling villagers, holding a shovel and looking exhausted but happy. I remembered that day vividly. It had been the culmination of 4 months of 12-hour workdays, navigating local politics, sourcing materials, and training technicians. But seeing the joy on everyone's faces when that first clear, clean water had flowed from the tap made every challenge worthwhile. We keep this picture in our community center, Rosa explained, right next to the altar in our chapel. The children learn your story in school. You're not just someone who came and left. You're part of our history, our legacy. I studied the photograph, remembering the woman I'd been then. She looked confident, purposeful, like someone who knew exactly why she was on this earth. Somewhere between that moment and this hospital bed, I'd lost touch with that version of myself. The constant criticism from my family, the subtle suggestions that I was wasting my talents, the loneliness of always being the odd one out, it had all taken its toll. Miss Maya, Rosa said gently, forgive me for asking, but why do you look so sad? You've accomplished so much, helped so many people. In our village, you're considered one of the most important people we've ever known. But here, you seem forgotten. How could I explain the complexity of living between 2 worlds? In villages like Barangay San Miguel, my work was seen as heroic, essential, life-saving. But in my hometown, among the people I'd grown up with, it was seen as an expensive way to avoid getting a real job. The disconnect was jarring and emotionally exhausting. My family had never hidden their disappointment in my choices. Every family gathering became an opportunity for well-meaning relatives to ask when I was going to settle down and start a real career. My parents had stopped bragging about me to their friends years ago, finding it easier to change the subject when asked about their younger daughter's accomplishments. Vanessa, in particular, seemed to take personal offense to my career path. She'd worked hard to build a reputation in our city's social circles, and my unconventional choices reflected poorly on the family image she was trying to cultivate. At dinner parties, when people asked about me, she'd give vague answers about me doing humanitarian work, but would quickly redirect the conversation to her own achievements. It's complicated, I finally said to Rosa. My family loves me, but they don't understand what I do or why I do it. They think I'm wasting my education and my potential. Rosa's expression grew fierce. Wasting your potential? Miss Maya, do you know what our village was like before you came? Children were dying from waterborne diseases. Women were walking miles every day just to collect contaminated water from polluted sources. Our economy was failing because we couldn't grow healthy crops or support livestock. You didn't just bring us clean water, you brought us hope, health, and a future. She pulled out her phone again and started scrolling through photos. Look, she said, showing me image after image. This is the school we built after the water system was installed. This is the new health clinic. This is our expanded market where farmers sell vegetables grown with clean irrigation. None of this would exist without you. Each photo was a testament to the ripple effects of sustainable development work. The water system hadn't just solved one problem, it had been the foundation for an entire community transformation. Children who might have spent their days searching for water were now in school. Women who had been burdened with water collection were now running small businesses. The village that had been slowly dying was now thriving. And it's not just our village, Rosa continued, her voice growing more animated. Remember I told you that other communities replicated your design? Let me show you something. She made another video call, and soon I was looking at a different village entirely. The architecture was similar, but I could tell this wasn't Barangay San Miguel. This is Barangay Santa Rosa, Rosa explained. 2 years ago, they used your water purification design to solve their own crisis. Engineer Santos traveled there to help them implement it. The phone was passed around, and I found myself talking to villagers I'd never met, but who knew my name and my story. They thanked me repeatedly, showing me their own thriving community center and newly constructed facilities. The pattern continued as Rosa connected me with village after village. My original design had become a template, adapted and improved by local engineers, spreading across the region like a beneficial virus. Conservative estimates suggested that my initial 4-month project had eventually provided clean water access to over 15,000 people across multiple communities. Miss Maya, Rosa said after the last call ended, you look shocked. Did you not know about this? I shook my head, still processing the magnitude of what I'd just learned. The foundation doesn't usually provide long-term follow-up reports, I explained. We're always moving on to the next emergency, the next crisis. I knew our projects were designed to be sustainable, but I never imagined. You never imagined that your work would continue growing after you left, Rosa finished. But that's exactly what good work does. It takes on a life of its own, spreads to where it's needed most. For years, I'd been measuring my worth by my family's standards, feeling like a failure because I wasn't climbing corporate ladders or accumulating wealth. But here was concrete evidence that my work had created lasting, expanding impact on a scale I'd never dreamed possible. I wasn't just helping people, I was creating systems that helped people help themselves, and then help others in turn. There's something else I need to tell you, Rosa said, her voice becoming more serious. The reason I became a nurse, the reason I moved to this country, it was because of you. I looked at her in surprise. Because of me? When you were in our village, you didn't just work on the water system. You spent time in our clinic, helping wherever you could. You taught our health workers about waterborne disease prevention, about proper sanitation practices. You showed us how clean water wasn't just about convenience. It was about health, about saving lives. She paused, gathering her thoughts. I was working as a midwife then, but I watched you and realized I wanted to do more. You inspired me to go back to school, to become a registered nurse. I moved here 5 years ago, and I've been working in this hospital ever since. Every patient I help, every life I touch, it's all connected back to the example you set in our village. The revelation left me speechless. I've had no idea that my time in Barangay San Miguel had influenced Rosa's career path, much less that it had led her to this hospital, to this moment where our paths would cross again. The interconnectedness of it all was almost too much to comprehend. You don't understand, do you? Rosa said softly, seeing my expression. You think you're just one person doing a job, but you're actually the center of a web that connects thousands of lives. Every person you've helped has gone on to help others. Every community you've transformed has shared their knowledge with neighboring communities. You're not just Maya Chen, the engineer who fixes water systems. You're Maya Chen, the catalyst who changes entire regions. I felt a profound shift happening inside me, like tectonic plates realigning after years of pressure. For so long, I'd been viewing my work through the lens of my family's disappointment, measuring its value by standards that had nothing to do with its actual impact. But hearing Rosa's story, seeing the photographs, connecting with villagers across multiple communities, it was forcing me to confront the reality of what I'd actually accomplished. "Rosa," I said quietly, "my sister was just here. She left early because she had a charity gala to attend. She's being honored tonight for her fundraising work, and she considers that more important than staying with me while I'm in the hospital." Rosa's expression grew troubled. A charity gala? What kind of charity? "Clean water initiatives in developing countries," I said with bitter irony. "She raises money for organizations that do the kind of work I actually do in the field. She gets the recognition, the awards, the social status, all for writing checks to fund the work that people like me actually perform." The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken understanding. Rosa didn't need to say anything for me to know what she was thinking. The disconnect between perception and reality, between those who got credit and those who did the work, was painfully obvious. "Miss Maya," Rosa said finally, "I think it's time your family learned who you really are." I shook my head weakly. "It's not that simple. They've made up their minds about me years ago. I'm the dreamer, the idealist, the one who can't get her life together. They're not interested in changing their opinion." "But what if they didn't have a choice?" Rosa asked, her eyes beginning to sparkle with an idea I wasn't sure I was ready for. What if the truth was so obvious, so undeniable, that they had to see it? Before I could ask what she meant, Rosa was back on her phone, making another call. This time she was speaking to someone in English, her voice taking on a more formal, professional tone. "Hello, this is Rosa Delgado, RN, calling from Metropolitan General Hospital. I need to speak with someone from your newsroom about a story that needs to be told." "Rosa, no," I said urgently, trying to sit up despite the IV line. "Please don't. I don't want this to become some kind of media circus." But Rosa held up a hand, continuing her conversation. "Yes, it's about Maya Chen, the engineer who's been working with clean water initiatives in Southeast Asia. She's currently a patient here, and I think the community needs to know about the incredible work she's been doing." I watched in growing alarm as Rosa arranged for a reporter to come to the hospital. This was exactly the kind of attention I'd spent years avoiding. My work was supposed to be about the communities I served, not about me personally. The last thing I wanted was to become some kind of poster child for humanitarian work. "Rosa, please," I tried again when she hung up. "I really don't want this. My family, they'll see this as me trying to show them up, trying to prove I'm better than them. It'll only make things worse." Rosa sat down beside me again, her expression gentle but determined. "Miss Maya, with respect, I don't think things can get much worse than lying alone in a hospital while your sister attends a party to get praise for funding the kind of work you actually do." She had a point, but the thought of public attention still made me uncomfortable. I'd chosen fieldwork partially because it allowed me to help people without being in the spotlight. The idea of reporters and cameras and interviews felt completely contrary to everything I valued about my work. "Besides," Rosa continued, "this isn't about your family. This is about all the other young people who might be inspired by your story. Do you know how many engineering students give up on humanitarian work because they think it's not a real career? Do you know how many people are told they're wasting their potential if they want to help others instead of making money?" I hadn't thought about it from that perspective. Throughout my career, I'd met countless bright, passionate young professionals who'd been discouraged from pursuing development work because it wasn't seen as prestigious or financially rewarding. Many of them had given up on their dreams and taken corporate jobs that left them feeling unfulfilled. "You could be proof that it's not only possible to make a difference, but that the impact can be extraordinary," Rosa said. "Your story could give other people permission to follow their hearts instead of just following the money." The idea was both terrifying and intriguing. I'd never seen myself as someone who could inspire others, But I had to admit that I'd often wished I'd had role models when I was starting out, people who could show me that meaningful work was possible and valuable, even if it didn't fit traditional definitions of success. What if they ask about my family? I asked. What if they want to know why I'm here alone? Then you tell the truth, Rosa said simply. You tell them that sometimes the people closest to us have the hardest time seeing who we really are, but that doesn't diminish what you've accomplished or who you've helped. As if summoned by our conversation, my phone buzzed with a text message. It was from my mother. Vanessa told us you're in the hospital. Hope you feel better soon. Dad and I are in depositions all week, but we'll try to call when we can. I showed the message to Rosa, who read it with a frown. Try to call? She repeated.
Their daughter is in the hospital, and they'll try to call when they can? The casual dismissiveness of it struck me differently now, seen through Rosa's eyes. If I'd been in Barangay San Miguel and had fallen ill, the entire village would have been at my bedside, bringing food, offering prayers, making sure I had everything I needed. The contrast was stark and painful. You know what the saddest part is? I said to Rosa. I've gotten so used to this that it doesn't even surprise me anymore. I've trained myself not to expect more from them because disappointment hurts too much. Rosa's expression grew fierce again. Ms. Maya, you've spent years making sure other people have what they need to survive and thrive. Don't you think you deserve the same consideration? Don't you think you deserve a family that celebrates your achievements instead of dismissing them? The question hung in the air, unanswerable because the answer was too painful to acknowledge. Of course I deserved better. Of course I deserved to have people in my life who understood and appreciated what I did. But wanting something and having it were two very different things, and I'd learned long ago that it was easier to lower my expectations than to keep being hurt by unmet hopes. The reporter will be here in an hour, Rosa said, checking her phone. Her name is Jennifer Martinez, and she specializes in human interest stories about people making a difference in the world. She's good people. She won't sensationalize or exploit your story. I nodded reluctantly, still not entirely comfortable with the idea, but beginning to see Rosa's point. Maybe it was time to stop hiding my accomplishments, stop minimizing my impact just to make other people more comfortable. Maybe it was time to own who I was and what I'd achieved, regardless of whether my family could understand or appreciate it. There's one more thing, Rosa said, reaching into her purse again. I brought you something from the village. She pulled out a small carved wooden figure, a woman holding what appeared to be a water jug. The craftsmanship was exquisite, with intricate details that spoke of hours of careful work. This was made by Roberto Santos. You remember him, the carpenter who helped build the housing for the water pumps? He carved this after you left as a way of honoring what you did for us. We've kept it in our community center, but I think you should have it. I took the figurine carefully, feeling the smooth wood warm under my fingers. It was beautiful and meaningful in a way that no corporate award or family approval could ever match. This represented the real impact of my work, created by hands that had been directly touched by what I'd accomplished. Ms. Maya, Rosa said softly, I want you to understand something. In our village, we have a saying, ang tunay na bayani ay hindi humahanap ng papuri, pero dapat pa rin siyang kilalani. It means true heroes don't seek praise, but they still deserve to be recognized. The wisdom in those words resonated deeply. I'd spent so long focusing on not seeking praise that I'd forgotten I still deserved recognition. I'd allowed my family's dismissiveness to convince me that wanting acknowledgement was somehow selfish or egotistical. But there was nothing wrong with wanting the people I loved to understand and appreciate who I was and what I'd chosen to do with my life. As we sat there in comfortable silence, I felt something shifting inside me. The hospital room looked the same, the fluorescent lights still buzzed overhead, and I was still connected to an IV drip. But everything felt different now. I wasn't just Maya, the disappointing daughter lying alone in a hospital bed. I was Maya Chen, whose work had transformed thousands of lives, whose influence had spread across multiple communities, whose example had inspired others to pursue meaningful careers. The difference wasn't in external circumstances, It was in perspective, in finally seeing myself the way the people I'd helped saw me. For the first time in years, I felt proud of who I was and what I'd accomplished. And that pride wasn't dependent on anyone else's approval or understanding. It was mine, earned through hard work and meaningful impact, and no one could take it away from me. Rosa, I said finally, thank you. Not just for staying with me, but for helping me remember who I am. She smiled, patting my hand gently. Miss Maya, I should be thanking you. You gave me and my entire community a new life. The least I can do is help you see that your life has meaning and value, whether your family recognizes it or not. As we sat there in comfortable silence, Rosa continued sharing stories about the villages that had been touched by my work. Each story was a reminder that impact doesn't always look like what we expect it to look like, and that success can't always be measured by traditional metrics. Sometimes the most meaningful achievements happen quietly, in remote places, among people whose names never appear in newspapers or award ceremonies. But that didn't make them any less real, any less important, or any less worthy of recognition. And it was time for me to stop pretending otherwise. Jennifer Martinez arrived exactly when she said she would, carrying a small recording device and a notebook that looked like it had seen countless interviews. She was younger than I had expected, maybe in her early 30s, with intelligent eyes and an easy smile that immediately put me at ease. Rosa had been right about her. There was nothing sensational or exploitive in her manner. She introduced herself politely and asked if I was comfortable proceeding with the interview. I have to admit, Jennifer said, as she set up her equipment, when Rosa called me, I almost didn't believe her. The Maya Chen? The engineer behind the Mindanao water revolution? I've been following your work for years through my contacts in the development community. Your water purification designs have become legendary in humanitarian circles. I felt heat rise to my cheeks. I wouldn't say legendary. I just try to solve problems where I see them. Jennifer laughed softly. That's exactly what I was told you'd say. Rosa warned me that you're extremely modest about your accomplishments. She consulted her notes. Maya, do you realize that your initial design in Barangay San Miguel has been implemented in over 30 communities across Southeast Asia? Conservative estimates suggest your work has directly improved water access for more than 50,000 people. The number hit me like a physical blow. 50,000 people. I'd known my designs were being replicated, but I'd never heard such a comprehensive figure. Rosa squeezed my hand, seeing my shock. The ripple effects don't stop there, Jennifer continued. I've spoken with development economists who estimate that communities with reliable clean water access see economic growth rates 3 to 4 times higher than communities without it. Your work hasn't just saved lives, it's created prosperity, educational opportunities, and long-term sustainability for entire regions. As Jennifer spoke, I began to understand the true scope of what I'd been part of. Each water system wasn't just a technical solution. It was the foundation for everything else a community needed to thrive. Children who weren't sick from waterborne diseases could attend school consistently. Women who weren't spending hours each day collecting water could start businesses or pursue education. Farmers with access to clean irrigation could grow more food and generate income. Do you know who's behind that fundraising event? Jennifer asked, nodding toward the house event program.
And she sees her fundraising as more important and more valuable than the actual field work. To her, writing checks is a real contribution. Getting your hands dirty in remote villages is just playing around. How does that make you feel? Jennifer asked, her voice soft with empathy. I was quiet for a long moment, considering how honest I wanted to be. It makes me feel invisible, I finally admitted. Like the work itself doesn't matter, only the money that funds it. Like I'm somehow less valuable because I chose to be the person who actually solves the problems instead of the person who pays someone else to solve them. Rosa had been listening quietly, but now she spoke up. Jennifer, you should know that Maya's sister isn't unusual. When I called the hospital administration to verify Maya's identity, they were surprised that someone of her caliber was here without any family support. They said most of their high-profile patients have rooms full of flowers and constant visitors. But Maya isn't high-profile in the traditional sense, Jennifer observed. Her work happens in remote locations, often without media attention. The communities she helps know her name, but the general public doesn't. Exactly, Rosa said. She's famous in villages across the Philippines, but unknown in her hometown. People who've never met her pray for her every Sunday, but her own family doesn't understand what she does. Jennifer turned back to me. Maya, help me understand something. You have a degree from one of the top engineering schools in the country. You could easily be making six figures working for any major corporation. What made you choose international development work instead? The question took me back to my senior year of college, when I'd first encountered the statistics about global water scarcity. I remembered the moment it had hit me that engineering wasn't just about building things. It was about solving problems that mattered, that could save lives and transform communities. I realized that my skills could either make rich people richer, or they could give people access to the most basic necessity for human survival, I said. It wasn't really a difficult choice once I understood the scope of the global water crisis. Nearly 1 billion people lack access to clean water. That's not an abstract problem. That's 1 billion individual human beings whose lives could be dramatically improved with the right technical solutions. And your family didn't see it that way? My parents are both attorneys. They built their firm from nothing, worked incredibly hard to achieve financial security. To them, deliberately choosing lower-paying work feels like throwing away the opportunities they sacrificed to give me. They can't understand why I'd walk away from potential wealth to help people I don't know in countries I have no connection to. Jennifer nodded thoughtfully. But you do have connections to those countries now. Rosa, can you tell me what Maya means to your community? Rosa's face lit up. In our village, Maya is like a saint. Seriously. We have a shrine dedicated to her in our community center. Every year on the anniversary of our water system activation, we hold a festival in her honor. Children learn her story in school. When young people are deciding what to study, their parents tell them about Maya Chen and how education can be used to help others. A festival in her honor? Jennifer repeated, looking at me with amazement. Maya, did you know about this? I shook my head, overwhelmed. I had no idea. I left the village once the system was operational and the local technicians were trained. I thought that was the end of my involvement. That's exactly why you're so revered, Rosa explained. You didn't stay to take credit or to be thanked. You just did the work and moved on to help the next community. But we never forgot. We never stopped being grateful. Jennifer was taking notes rapidly. This is fascinating. Maya, you're essentially living a double life. In one world, you're dismissed and undervalued. In another world, you're celebrated and honored. How do you reconcile those two realities? I don't know that I do reconcile them, I admitted. For a long time, I just tried to keep them separate. When I'm working overseas, I feel like I'm living my purpose, doing what I was meant to do. When I come home, I feel like I'm disappointing everyone, just by existing. But that's changing now, isn't it? Rosa interjected. Meeting me, hearing these stories, seeing the photographs, it's helping you understand your real impact. She was right. Something fundamental had shifted in the past few hours. I was beginning to see my work through the eyes of the people I'd helped, rather than through the lens of my family's disappointment. The contrast was stark and illuminating. Rosa mentioned that your designs have been replicated throughout the region, Jennifer said. Can you walk me through how that happens? How does a water system you build in one village end up helping communities you've never visited? I thought about Engineer Santos and the training programs we'd established. Part of sustainable development is making sure local communities can maintain and replicate solutions without ongoing outside support. When I design a system, I don't just build it and leave. I spend months training local engineers and technicians, teaching them not just how to maintain the equipment, but how to adapt the design for different environments and needs. So you're essentially teaching people to teach others. Exactly. The goal isn't to create dependence on foreign expertise. The goal is to transfer knowledge and skills so communities can solve their own problems and help neighboring communities solve similar problems. Jennifer smiled. So you're not just an engineer, you're an educator, a capacity builder, a systems thinker. I suppose so. I never really thought about it in those terms. That's what makes this so remarkable, Jennifer said, consulting her notes again. You've created a model for sustainable development that doesn't just fix immediate problems, it builds long-term capacity for entire regions. No wonder your work has had such far-reaching impact. Rosa pulled out her phone again. Jennifer, would you like to speak with some of the other communities Maya has helped? I can connect you with several villages that have implemented her designs. Absolutely, Jennifer said eagerly. Maya, would you be comfortable with that? I'd love to get perspectives from multiple communities about the impact of your work. I nodded, curious to hear what other villages might say. Rosa made several calls, and soon we were connected via video chat with communities across the Philippines, Indonesia, and even parts of Vietnam where my designs had been adapted. The conversations that followed were unlike anything I'd ever experienced. Village after village shared stories of transformation, of children who could now attend school because they weren't sick from contaminated water, of women who had started successful businesses with the time they'd gained from not having to walk miles for water collection, of entire communities that had become economically self-sufficient once they had reliable access to clean water. Engineer Santos joined one of the calls from Barangay San Miguel, and Jennifer was able to interview him directly about the technical aspects of the replication process. He explained how Maya's original design had been modified and improved over the years, adapted for different geological conditions and resource availability. Miss Maya taught us not just to build one system, but to understand the principles behind the system, he said in careful English. Now we are teachers too, helping other communities across Mindanao and even other islands.
Her knowledge grows like seeds. One project becomes many projects. Jennifer was fascinated by the organic spread of the technology. So there's no formal organization overseeing this replication? No corporate structure or international NGO managing the expansion? That's what makes it so sustainable, I explained. When communities own the knowledge and the implementation process, they don't need ongoing outside support. They can adapt and innovate based on their specific needs and resources. And they're motivated to share with neighboring communities because they understand firsthand how transformative the impact can be, Rosa added. This is extraordinary, Jennifer said, looking up from her notes. Maya, you've essentially created a viral model for development work. Your initial investment of time and expertise has generated exponential returns in terms of communities served and lives improved. The mathematical elegance of it was beautiful in a way I'd never fully appreciated. Each community that successfully implemented the water system became a teaching center for surrounding areas. The knowledge and skills spread organically, driven by genuine need and proven results, rather than top-down mandates or funding requirements. Jennifer, Rosa said, I think you should know that Maya isn't the only person whose career was influenced by her work in our village. She inspired several of our young people to pursue engineering and public health degrees. 3 of them are now working on development projects in other countries, using the model Maya taught us. I stared at Rosa in shock. I didn't know that either. There's a lot you don't know about your impact, Rosa said gently. You plant seeds and then move on to plant more seeds. You don't stay to watch them grow, but they grow anyway. Jennifer was scribbling notes furiously. Maya, I have to ask, how does it feel to learn about all of this impact while you're lying in a hospital bed, essentially alone? Your work has touched thousands of lives, inspired career changes, transformed entire regions, and yet your own family doesn't seem to recognize your value. The question hung in the air, heavy with implications. How did it feel? It felt surreal, like discovering you had a secret identity you'd forgotten about. It felt validating in a way I'd never experienced. But it also felt deeply sad that the people I most wanted to understand and appreciate my work were the ones least capable of doing so. It feels like I've been living in 2 different universes, I said finally, and I'm just now realizing that one of those universes has been much more real and meaningful than the other. As if summoned by the emotional weight of the conversation, my phone rang. The caller ID showed my sister's name. I looked at Jennifer and Rosa, unsure whether to answer. Take it, Jennifer said quietly. Rosa and I will be here. I answered the call, putting it on speaker so everyone could hear. Hi, Vanessa. Maya. Vanessa's voice was bright and excited, slightly breathless from what sounded like a party in the background.
I just had to call you from the gala. You won't believe how amazing this event is. I'm sitting at the head table with the regional director of Aqualife International. Do you know they've raised over $2 million this year for clean water projects? I felt Rosa stiffen beside me, and Jennifer's eyebrows rose. Aqualife International was one of the organizations that had funded several of my projects, though they'd never directly acknowledged my work in their promotional materials. That's wonderful, Van, I said neutrally. I'm glad the fundraising is going well. Oh, it's going better than well. I'm being featured in their annual report as a major donor. They're talking about naming a project after our family. Vanessa's voice was full of pride and excitement. I just wish you could be here to see this. It's exactly the kind of high-level charitable work that makes a real difference in the world. The irony was so thick I could taste it. My sister was celebrating her involvement in funding the exact type of work I performed daily, while dismissing my actual fieldwork as insignificant. Vanessa, I said carefully, do you know what Aqualife International actually does with the money you raise? Of course I do. They fund clean water projects in developing countries, wells, purification systems, infrastructure development. They're making a huge impact. She paused. Why do you ask? I looked at Jennifer, who nodded encouragingly. I was just curious about the specific projects they fund. Do you know where the money goes? What kind of systems they build? Well, they work all over Southeast Asia primarily, the Philippines, Indonesia, places like that. They have this amazing engineer who's designed these revolutionary water purification systems that can be replicated across multiple communities. Vanessa's voice grew more animated. The regional director was telling me about her tonight. Apparently, she's like a legend in development circles. Maya Chen, I think her name was. The silence that followed was deafening. Rosa covered her mouth with her hand, her eyes wide with disbelief. Jennifer was staring at the phone like it had just performed a magic trick. Did you say Maya Chen? I asked quietly. Yes, isn't that funny? She has the same first name as you. But this Maya Chen is apparently some kind of genius engineer who's transformed water access across entire regions. The director said her work has helped tens of thousands of people. Can you imagine having that kind of impact? I felt tears welling up in my eyes, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of something approaching cosmic irony. My sister was at a gala celebrating my work while having no idea that her disappointing sister was the person being honored. Vanessa, I said slowly, I need to tell you something. What's that? She asked, distracted by something happening at the gala. I am Maya Chen. The silence stretched for so long I thought the call had dropped. What do you mean? Vanessa finally asked, her voice smaller than before. I mean, I'm the engineer they're talking about, Maya Chen, the one who designed the water systems in the Philippines. That's my work they're celebrating tonight. Those projects you're raising money for, I'm the one who builds them. Another long silence. In the background, I could hear the sounds of the gala continuing, laughter, clinking glasses, the gentle murmur of conversation. But Vanessa wasn't participating anymore. That's not possible, she said finally. You do paperwork for a nonprofit. You've never mentioned anything about being some kind of famous engineer. I've tried to tell you about my work for years, I said gently, but every time I bring it up, you change the subject or dismiss it as unimportant. I stopped trying to explain because it was clear you weren't interested. But the regional director said Maya Chen's work has helped 50,000 people, Vanessa stammered. He said she's revolutionized sustainable development practices in Southeast Asia. That's what I do, Van. That's what I've been doing for the past 8 years. The paperwork for a nonprofit is designing water purification systems, training local engineers, and implementing sustainable infrastructure in communities that lack access to clean water. I could hear Vanessa's breathing through the phone, quick and shallow. Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you make me understand? I tried, I said, feeling exhausted suddenly. Remember when I got that commendation last year? When I tried to explain the project I'd led in Indonesia? You said I was boring Kevin with talk about spreadsheets and suggested I should focus on building a legacy for the family like you were doing. Oh my God, Vanessa whispered. Oh my God, Maya. The director wants to meet you. He said Maya Chen is almost impossible to reach, that she spends most of her time in remote locations. He's been trying to arrange a meeting for months. I'm usually in remote locations because that's where the work is, I said. But right now, I'm in Metropolitan General Hospital, room 314. You're in the hospital, Vanessa said, her voice full of sudden realization. And I left early to come to a party that's celebrating your work. Maya, I am so sorry. I am so sorry. Jennifer was watching this conversation unfold with obvious fascination, taking notes as my family dynamic imploded and restructured itself in real time. Rosa was crying again, but these were happy tears, tears of vindication and relief. Vanessa, I need you to understand something, I said. I'm not telling you this to make you feel bad or to prove that I'm better than you thought. I'm telling you because I'm tired of being invisible in my own family. I'm tired of having my work dismissed when it's actually the most meaningful thing I've ever done with my life. The most meaningful. Maya, you've helped 50,000 people. 50. Do you understand how incredible that is? Vanessa's voice was full of awe and something that sounded like pride. My little sister is a literal hero, and I've been treating her like she's a failure. I'm not a hero, I said. I'm just someone who found a way to use my skills to solve problems that matter. That's exactly what makes you a hero, Jennifer interjected, then quickly apologized for speaking during what was clearly a private family moment. Who was that? Vanessa asked. That's Jennifer Martinez. She's a reporter who's here interviewing me about my work. Rosa, the nurse who's been taking care of me, recognized my name and called her. A reporter wants to interview you? Maya, this is incredible. God, I can't believe how wrong I've been about everything. Vanessa's voice broke slightly. I'm leaving the gala right now. I'm coming to the hospital. Van, you don't have to. Yes, I do. I absolutely do. I need to see you, and I need to meet Rosa, and I need to understand your work properly. And Naya, I'm bringing the regional director with me. He's been desperate to meet you, and he needs to know that you're not getting the recognition you deserve. After Vanessa hung up, the room fell quiet except for the familiar hum of the fluorescent lights. Jennifer was still taking notes, Rosa was wiping happy tears from her eyes, and I was trying to process what had just happened. Well, Jennifer said finally, I have to say, in 15 years of journalism, I've never had an interview take quite that turn. How do you feel? Rosa asked me gently. I considered the question seriously. How did I feel? Relief, certainly. Vindication, but also a strange sense of sadness for all the years of misunderstanding, all the family gatherings where I'd felt like an outsider, all the times I'd minimized my own accomplishments to avoid conflict. I feel like I've been holding my breath for 8 years, I said finally, and I can finally exhale. Jennifer smiled. Maya, I know this is a lot to process, but I want you to know that this story needs to be told. Not just for you, but for everyone who's ever been made to feel like meaningful work isn't valuable work. For everyone who's ever been told they're wasting their potential by trying to help others. You think it will make a difference? I asked. I think it will make all the difference, Rosa said firmly. Your story proves that success isn't just about money or status. It's about impact, about using your gifts to make the world better. As we waited for Vanessa and the regional director to arrive, Jennifer continued the interview, asking me about specific projects, technical challenges, and the future of sustainable development work. But my mind kept drifting to the phone call with my sister, to the moment when everything had changed. For years, I'd been living in 2 separate worlds, never allowing them to intersect. I'd kept my professional accomplishments hidden from my family, and I'd kept my family's disappointment separate from my work. But now, those worlds had collided, and the result wasn't the disaster I'd always feared. Instead, it was the beginning of something new, a life where I didn't have to choose between being understood and being meaningful. The wooden figurine Rosa had given me sat on the bedside table, a tangible reminder of the impact I'd made and the lives I'd touched. For the first time since I'd woken up in this hospital bed, I felt like I knew exactly who I was and what I was worth. And that knowledge didn't depend on anyone else's approval or understanding. I was Maya Chen, and I had changed the world, whether my family recognized it or not. 30 minutes later, I heard rapid footsteps in the hospital corridor, followed by familiar voices speaking in urgent, hushed tones. The door to my room swung open, and Vanessa appeared, still dressed in her elegant black gala gown, her face flushed from rushing through the hospital. Behind her was a distinguished man in his 60s wearing a perfectly tailored tuxedo, his silver hair impeccably styled despite the obvious haste of their departure. "Maya," Vanessa breathed, stopping abruptly at the foot of my bed. Her eyes were red-rimmed, and I could tell she'd been crying during the drive from the hotel. I don't even know where to begin. The man stepped forward, extending his hand with a reverence that seemed almost ceremonial. "Mrs. Chen, I'm Dr. Sana."
Richard Holloway, Regional Director for Aqualife International. It is an extraordinary honor to finally meet you. His voice carried the weight of genuine respect, the kind I'd grown accustomed to hearing from colleagues in the field, but never from anyone in my personal life. Rosa stood up, offering her chair to Vanessa, while Jennifer continued recording, clearly recognizing the significance of what was unfolding. Dr. Holloway remained standing, his posture formal and respectful, as if he were meeting a head of state rather than a woman in a hospital gown. "Miss Chen," Dr. Holloway continued, "I need you to understand that your work has become the gold standard for sustainable water development across our entire organization. We've been trying to arrange a meeting with you for over 2 years, but you're always in remote locations, always moving to the next crisis that needs your expertise." Vanessa sat down heavily, staring at me with an expression I'd never seen before. It wasn't pity or condescension or polite interest, it was awe, mixed with what appeared to be profound regret. "Maya," she said quietly, "Dr. Holloway spent the entire car ride here telling me about your projects. He has a presentation about your work that he shows at conferences around the world. There are engineering students who study your designs in universities across 3 continents." I felt overwhelmed by the surreal nature of the situation. Here was my sister, who had spent years dismissing my career as insignificant, learning about my professional reputation from a stranger at a charity gala that was, unknowingly, celebrating my achievements. Dr. Holloway pulled out his phone and showed me a presentation slide titled "Revolutionary Approaches to Community-Centered Water Development, the Maya Chen Model." The slide featured a photograph I recognized from my time in Barangay San Miguel, showing me working alongside local engineers to install the main filtration unit. "This presentation has been viewed by development professionals in 47 countries," Dr. Holloway said. "Your approach to knowledge transfer and community capacity building has influenced how our entire industry thinks about sustainable development." Rosa spoke up from where she stood near the window. "Dr. Holloway, I need you to understand something. Maya has been lying in this hospital room alone. Her family didn't know about any of this. They thought her work was unimportant." Dr. Holloway's expression shifted, confusion replacing the professional admiration. "I'm sorry, I don't understand. How could they not know? Miss Chen's work has been featured in the International Journal of Development Engineering, the Proceedings of the Global Water Summit, and countless humanitarian publications." "Because she never told us," Vanessa said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Because every time she tried to share what she was doing, we shut her down. We made it clear that we thought her job was a waste of her education and her potential." The silence that followed was heavy with implications. Dr. Holloway looked from Vanessa to me, clearly struggling to reconcile the disconnect between my professional stature and my family's perception of my work. "Miss Chen," he said carefully, "may I ask why you never mentioned your recognition in the development community? Surely your family would be proud to know about your achievements." I looked at Vanessa, seeing the pain in her eyes, knowing that my answer would hurt, but needing to be honest. I learned early on that talking about my work made family gatherings uncomfortable. It was easier to let them think I was just doing basic nonprofit administration than to keep explaining why I'd chosen a career that didn't make sense to them. "But your career makes perfect sense," Dr. Holloway said, his voice rising slightly with passion. "You've solved problems that have stumped development professionals for decades. Your community-centered approach has become the blueprint for sustainable infrastructure development worldwide." Jennifer, who had been quietly documenting this conversation, leaned forward. "Dr. Holloway, can you help us understand the scope of Maya's impact from an organizational perspective? What does her work mean in the larger context of global development?" Dr. Holloway's eyes lit up, clearly in his element when discussing development work.
Miss Chen has fundamentally changed how we approach water infrastructure projects. Before her innovations, most development organizations built systems and then moved on, hoping they would be maintained by local communities. The failure rate was catastrophic. Studies showed that nearly 60% of water projects failed within 5 years due to lack of maintenance or improper implementation. He began pacing slightly, his academic enthusiasm taking over. Maya's approach was revolutionary because she built sustainability into every aspect of the process. She doesn't just design systems, she creates educational frameworks, trains local experts, and establishes maintenance protocols that communities can manage independently. Her failure rate is less than 5%, and her projects consistently exceed their intended lifespans. Vanessa was listening with complete attention, her lawyer's mind clearly processing the implications of what she was hearing. When you say failure rate, what exactly does that mean in human terms? It means the difference between temporary relief and permanent transformation, Dr. Holloway explained. A failed water project doesn't just mean broken equipment, it means communities that return to using contaminated water sources, children who get sick again, women who go back to spending hours each day collecting water instead of attending school or working. Rosa nodded emphatically. That's exactly why Maya's work is so sacred to us. She didn't just fix our immediate problem, she gave us the knowledge and tools to never have that problem again. Sacred, Dr. Holloway repeated thoughtfully. That's not a word we often hear in development circles, but it's appropriate. What Miss Chen has created goes beyond technical solutions. She's created a model for human dignity, for respecting communities as partners rather than beneficiaries. I felt tears welling up again, but these were different from the tears I'd shed earlier. These came from a deep well of validation I'd never known existed. For years, I'd wondered if my work really mattered, if the personal sacrifices I'd made were justified by the impact I was having. Hearing Dr. Holloway articulate the significance of my approach in terms of global development strategy was profoundly affirming. There's something else, Dr. Holloway continued, turning to address Vanessa directly. Your sister's work has influenced policy at the highest levels of international development. The United Nations has adopted protocols based on her community engagement model. The World Bank now requires sustainability training components in all water infrastructure projects, using frameworks that Maya developed. Vanessa's face had gone pale. The United Nations? The World Bank? Maya, you've influenced international policy? I nodded, feeling strange about acknowledging achievements that I'd grown so accustomed to downplaying. Some of the training protocols I developed have been incorporated into standard practices. Yes, but that was never the goal. I was just trying to make sure communities could maintain their systems after I left. Just trying? Jennifer repeated with a laugh. Maya, you say that like it's simple, but what you've created is a fundamental shift in how the entire development community approaches infrastructure projects. Dr. Holloway pulled out his phone again, scrolling through what appeared to be a contact list. Miss Chen, I hope you'll forgive the presumption, but I need to make some calls. There are people who need to know you're here, people who've been hoping to meet you for years. Oh, that's really not necessary, I began, but Rosa interrupted. Yes, it is necessary, she said firmly.
Maya, you've spent years hiding your light under a bushel. It's time for people to see who you really are. Dr. Holloway was already dialing. Dr. Patricia Reeves, this is Richard Holloway. You're not going to believe this, but I'm standing in a hospital room with Maya Chen. Yes, the Maya Chen. No, I'm not joking. As Dr. Holloway continued his phone call, Vanessa moved her chair closer to my bed. Maya, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. I looked at her warily. Okay. How many times did you try to tell us about your work? How many times did we shut you down, or change the subject, or make you feel like what you were doing didn't matter? The question hung in the air between us, loaded with years of accumulated hurt. I thought about all the family dinners where I'd tried to share stories from the field, only to be met with polite disinterest or outright dismissal. I thought about the commendations and recognitions that had gone unmentioned because I'd learned they weren't welcome topics of conversation. Van, what's done is done, I said gently. What matters is that you understand now. No, that's not good enough, Vanessa said, her voice stronger. I need to understand how badly we failed you. I need to know so I can make sure it never happens again. I was quiet for a long moment, considering how honest to be.
Every family gathering for the past 8 years, I finally said. Every holiday, every birthday, every time I came home from a project. I would try to share what I was working on, what I was learning, what I was accomplishing, but the conversation would always drift back to your cases, or mom and dad's latest clients, or my lack of a traditional career path. Vanessa closed her eyes, pain evident on her face. The Christmas 2 years ago, when you came back from that project in Indonesia, you tried to tell us about the village you'd helped, and I interrupted you to talk about my partnership track. I remembered that conversation vividly. I'd been excited to share the story of a community that had gone from having no reliable water source to becoming a regional training center for other villages. But Vanessa had been celebrating a major promotion, and the conversation had quickly shifted to her career advancement. You were excited about your partnership, I said. It was a big achievement. I understood. But your achievement was bigger, Vanessa said, tears streaming down her face now. You had just transformed an entire community, and I was talking about billable hours. God, Maya, how can you not hate us? The question caught me off guard. Hate them? I'd never hated my family, even during the most frustrating moments of feeling misunderstood. I'd been hurt, certainly. I'd felt invisible and undervalued, but hate had never entered the equation. I don't hate you, I softly. I love you, all of you. I just wished you could see me the way Rosa's community sees me, the way Dr. Holloway's organization sees me. I wished I could be proud of my work in front of my own family. Dr. Holloway had finished his phone call and was approaching my bed with an expression of barely contained excitement. Miss Chen, I've just spoken with Dr. Patricia Reeves from the International Development Consortium, Dr. James Liu from the Global Water Initiative, and Professor Sarah Martinez from the Institute for Sustainable Engineering. They're all flying here tomorrow. Flying here? I repeated, alarmed. That's really not necessary. I'll be discharged tomorrow, and I can meet with them when I'm back on my feet. With respect, Miss Chen, these are people who have been trying to meet with you for years. Dr. Reeves has been following your work since your first project in the Philippines. Professor Martinez teaches courses based on your methodologies at 3 different universities. This is not just a courtesy visit. This is a convergence of some of the most influential minds in sustainable development, all wanting to collaborate with you. Jennifer was scribbling notes frantically, clearly recognizing the magnitude of what was happening. Maya, do you realize that you're about to become the center of what amounts to an international development conference, all organized around meeting you? The irony wasn't lost on me. For years, I'd felt like the least important person in any room I entered with my family. Now I was discovering that in other rooms, among other people, I was considered one of the most important voices in my field. Rosa had been watching this unfold with obvious satisfaction. Miss Maya, she said, do you remember what I told you about your village festival? About how we celebrate the anniversary of our water system every year? I nodded. Well, I think you're about to have many more festivals to attend, she said with a smile. Communities all over the world are going to want to honor you once this story gets out. Once this story gets out? I repeated, looking at Jennifer. Jennifer nodded. Maya, this is going to be a major story, not just because of your professional achievements, but because of what it says about how we value different kinds of success. Your story challenges every assumption about what constitutes meaningful work. My phone buzzed with a text message. It was from my mother. Vanessa called us. We're on our way to the hospital. We had no idea, sweetheart. We're so sorry. I showed the message to Vanessa, who read it and immediately called our parents. Mom, yes, we're here with Maya now. No, you need to understand, she's not just successful, she's world-renowned. Dr. Holloway is here. He runs a major international organization, and he says Maya is the most respected engineer in her field.
As Vanessa continued explaining the situation to our parents, Dr. Holloway sat down in the chair Rosa had vacated. Miss Chen, I hope you don't mind me asking, but what are your plans going forward? Are you still working with the Clean Water Initiative? I thought about my current project status, about the deployment I was supposed to begin in 6 weeks to a drought-affected region of East Africa. I'm scheduled to start a new project in Kenya next month, drought mitigation and aquifer restoration. Kenya, Dr. Holloway repeated thoughtfully. That's an ambitious project. Aquifer restoration is incredibly complex work.
It is, I agreed, but the community there has been struggling with water scarcity for over a decade. If we can restore their groundwater access and create sustainable management protocols, it could serve as a model for other drought-affected regions across sub-Saharan Africa. Dr. Holloway's eyes lit up. Miss Chen, what if I told you that Aqualife International has been looking for exactly that kind of pilot project? We have funding allocated for drought mitigation research, but we've been waiting for the right technical lead. Are you offering me a job? I asked, surprised. I'm offering you a partnership, Dr. Holloway clarified. Aqualife International would provide funding, logistical support, and documentation resources. You would maintain complete technical and strategic control over the project. But instead of working in isolation, you'd have a full support team and the resources to document and replicate your methods on a much larger scale. The offer was tempting, but I'd grown protective of my independence in the field. Dr. Holloway, I appreciate the offer, but I found that organizational oversight can sometimes interfere with community-centered approaches. Which is exactly why we want to work with you, Dr. Holloway said. Miss Chen, Aqualife International doesn't want to change your methods. We want to learn from them. We want to scale your approach, train other engineers in your methodologies, and create a global network of development professionals who can implement your community-centered model. Rosa had been listening to this conversation with growing excitement. Miss Maya, this sounds like exactly what Engineer Santos was talking about, spreading your knowledge to help even more communities. It's more than that, Jennifer interjected. Maya, if you partner with Aqualife International, your methodologies could be implemented simultaneously across dozens of countries. Instead of helping thousands of people sequentially, you could help millions of people concurrently. The scale of impact Dr. Holloway was describing was almost beyond comprehension. I'd spent my career moving from project to project, community to community, always knowing that there were hundreds of other places that needed similar help but couldn't access it. The possibility of multiplying my impact through training and partnership was both thrilling and overwhelming. Vanessa had finished her phone call and was listening to our conversation with intense focus. Maya, she said, this sounds like an incredible opportunity. You could potentially help more people in 1 year than most development professionals help in their entire careers. But I'd need to spend more time in administrative roles, more time in conference rooms, and less time in the field, I said, voicing my primary concern. The work I love most is the hands-on problem solving, the direct community engagement. Dr. Holloway nodded understandingly. What if the partnership allowed for both? What if you could spend 6 months each year in the field working directly on implementation, and 6 months each year training other engineers, developing curricula, and overseeing project replication? The compromise was appealing. I'd always enjoyed the teaching aspects of my work, the moments when I could transfer knowledge to local engineers and watch them take ownership of the technical solutions. Expanding that educational component while maintaining fieldwork could be the best of both worlds. There's something else to consider, Rosa said quietly. Miss Maya, if you train more engineers in your methods, think about how many villages like mine could be helped. Right now, you can only be in one place at a time. But if there were 50 engineers who could implement your approach, or 100, the mathematical progression was staggering. Each engineer I trained could potentially help dozens of communities over the course of their career. Those communities could then train neighboring communities, creating an exponential expansion of impact that could transform entire regions. Dr. Holloway, I said slowly, would this partnership allow me to maintain the community-centered approach that's central to my methodology? Would I have the authority to reject projects that don't meet sustainability criteria? Absolutely, Dr. Holloway said firmly. Ms. Chen, Aqualife International's board has been frustrated for years by the high failure rate of traditional development projects. We need your expertise precisely because your approach works when conventional methods fail. We're not looking to constrain your methods, we're looking to amplify them. Jennifer looked up from her notes. Maya, this could be the perfect ending to the story I'm writing. The engineer who was undervalued by her own family, but whose work was so important that it led to international partnerships and policy changes. It's not an ending, Rosa corrected gently. It's a beginning. Miss Maya's real impact is just starting. As if summoned by Rosa's words, the door to my room opened again, and my parents appeared. My mother, Linda, was still in her business suit from what had clearly been a rushed departure from their law office. My father, David, looked uncharacteristically disheveled, his usually perfect tie slightly askew. "Maya," my mother said, her voice breaking slightly, "Sweetheart, we had no idea. We are so sorry." Dr. Holloway immediately stood and introduced himself, explaining his role and the reason for his presence. As he outlined my professional accomplishments, I watched my parents' faces transform from confusion to amazement to something approaching pride. "The United Nations?" my father repeated, just as Vanessa had. "Maya influenced United Nations policy? Her community engagement protocols are now standard practice for all UN water development projects," Dr. Holloway confirmed. "Your daughter has quite literally changed how the world approaches sustainable development." My mother sat down heavily in the chair Dr. Holloway had vacated. "Maya, why didn't you tell us? Why didn't you make us understand how important your work was?" It was the same question Vanessa had asked, and it deserved the same honest answer. "I tried, Mom. For years, I tried. But every time I shared what I was working on, you and Dad would suggest that I was wasting my education, that I should come work at the firm, that I needed to think about building real financial security." "But this is real," my father said, gesturing toward Dr. Holloway. "This is incredibly real and incredibly important. Maya, you've been saving lives while we've been pushing papers around conference room tables." The comparison was stark but apt. My parents had built successful careers solving legal problems for wealthy clients, while I'd been solving survival problems for people with no other options. Both were valuable in their own way, but the scale of human impact was dramatically different. "Mr. and Mrs. Chen," Dr. Holloway said respectfully, "I hope you understand that your daughter is considered one of the most important voices in international development. Her work is studied in universities, her methods are replicated by organizations worldwide, and her impact has been felt by hundreds of thousands of people across multiple continents." "Hundreds of thousands," my mother whispered. "Our Maya has helped hundreds of thousands of people." "And that number grows every day," Rosa added. "Every community that implements Miss Maya's designs becomes a teaching center for other communities. Her work spreads like ripples in water, reaching places she's never even been." As my family absorbed the magnitude of what they were learning, I felt a profound shift in the room's energy. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't the disappointing daughter who'd made questionable career choices. I wasn't the family member who needed to be fixed or redirected. I was exactly who I'd always been, but now they could see me clearly. "Maya," my father said quietly, "I owe you an apology. We all do. We've been so focused on traditional measures of success that we completely missed the fact that you were achieving something far more meaningful than anything we've ever accomplished." The admission was more than I'd ever expected to hear. My father, who had spent decades building a law practice and accumulating wealth, was acknowledging that my work had more significance than his own professional achievements. "Dad, you don't need to diminish what you've built," I said gently. "Your work matters too. You've helped people, created jobs, built something lasting. We just chose different ways to make a difference." "But your way helps people who have no other options," my mother said, tears in her eyes. "Our clients can afford to hire other lawyers if we're not available. The communities you serve, if you don't help them, who will?" It was a question that had driven me throughout my career. The villages I worked in didn't have backup options, didn't have alternative resources. When I arrived in a community facing a water crisis, I was often their last hope for a sustainable solution. Jennifer had been documenting this family reconciliation with obvious emotion. "This is beautiful," she said softly. "Maya, your story is going to inspire so many people who feel like their families don't understand their choices." Dr. Holloway checked his watch. "I hate to interrupt this moment, but I do need to finalize some arrangements for tomorrow's meetings. Miss Chen, should I tell the visiting experts that you're interested in discussing the partnership opportunity?" I looked around the room at the faces surrounding me. Rosa, whose village had been transformed by my work and who had become an advocate for my recognition. Jennifer, who was documenting this story of hidden impact and family reconciliation. Vanessa, who was learning to see her sister as someone worthy of respect and admiration. My parents, who were finally understanding the true nature of my career. Yes, I said, feeling more confident than I had in years. Tell them I'm very interested in exploring how we can expand this work to help more communities. Dr. Holloway smiled broadly. Excellent, I'll make the arrangements. Miss Chen, I have a feeling that tomorrow is going to be the beginning of a new chapter in your already extraordinary career. As Dr. Holloway left to make his phone calls and Jennifer packed up her recording equipment, promising to share the article with me before publication, I found myself alone with my family and Rosa. The hospital room that had felt so sterile and lonely just hours earlier now felt warm and full of possibility. Maya, Vanessa said, reaching for my hand, I want you to know that I understand now. I understand why you chose this work, why it matters, and why you're willing to make the sacrifices you've made for it. I'm proud of you. I'm so incredibly proud to be your sister. My parents nodded in agreement, and I felt a completeness I'd never experienced before. For the first time in my adult life, my professional identity and my family identity were aligned. I didn't have to choose between being understood and being meaningful. I could be both. Rosa was smiling through happy tears. Miss Maya, do you remember what I told you about true heroes? They don't seek praise, but they still deserve recognition? I nodded. Well, now you have both the recognition you deserve and the platform to help even more people. Your village festival is about to become a global celebration. As the evening wore on and visiting hours came to an end, my family reluctantly prepared to leave, promising to return first thing in the morning to meet the international experts who were flying in to see me. Rosa was finishing her shift and would be replaced by another nurse, but she promised to check on me throughout the night. Miss Maya, Rosa said as she prepared to leave, I want you to remember something. When I walked into this room this morning, I found a woman who felt forgotten and undervalued. But you were never forgotten, and you were never undervalued. You just needed the right people around you to remind you of who you really are. After everyone had left and the hospital settled into its nighttime quiet, I lay in bed holding the wooden figurine Rosa had given me, thinking about the extraordinary day I just experienced. I'd woken up feeling like the least important person in my family, and I was going to sleep knowing that my work had influenced international policy and touched hundreds of thousands of lives. The recognition felt good, certainly, but what felt even better was the knowledge that tomorrow I would wake up with a clear path forward, a path that would allow me to continue doing the work I loved while expanding its reach beyond anything I'd ever imagined possible. Outside my window, the city lights twinkled like stars, each one representing lives being lived, problems being solved, dreams being pursued. Somewhere out there, in villages across the Philippines and Indonesia and Vietnam, families were going to bed with access to clean water because of systems I'd helped design and implement. Children would wake up healthy tomorrow because their communities had learned to maintain and protect their water sources. And somewhere else, in conference rooms and university classrooms around the world, engineers were studying my methods, preparing to carry this work forward to communities I would never visit, people I would never meet. The impact would continue to spread, rippling outward like Rosa had said, reaching places I could never go, but carrying the same principles of dignity, sustainability, and community empowerment that had guided my work from the beginning. I fell asleep that night not as the disappointing daughter who couldn't get her life together, but as Maya Chen, whose life's work had created a legacy that would outlast any individual project, any single career, any one person's efforts. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, and new ways to serve communities that needed technical solutions to fundamental problems. But tonight, for the first time in years, I slept peacefully, knowing exactly who I was and exactly why my work mattered. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.